Hey guys, my name is Hill-Botchwey, and I am doing this video to share my experience with deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism, also known as blood clots. This month, the month of March, is Blood Clot Awareness Month, and to kick it off, I thought I'd share my story with my basic experience of before going into the hospital and my experience in the hospital. So I will start off with the reason why I ended up with blood clots in the first place. I had some injuries to my right foot. And in February, my podiatrist and I decided to correct it. I had a bone spur in the back of my heel from doing a lot of standing in one place at work for long hours. So the bone spur kind of dug into my Achilles, and eventually it caused a split tear. I also had a tendon in my right ankle that was torn called the peroneus brevis. And we also decided that we would do a gastrocnemius recession in the calf as well to kind of relieve some of the pressure off of the Achilles in the right leg. So we set up the surgery. We tried physical therapy and a lot of other interventions, and it just didn't work for me. I was limping, was constantly in pain, could barely walk sometimes. So the surgery was February 26th. Everything went well. They even found a 1-inch tumor in my ankle, which had fragments of bone in it. They removed that. It was benign, no issues with that. So the doctor put me on pain medication and also Lovenox injections, which are anticoagulants to prevent me from getting blood clots. So about 2 weeks later, around March 9th, 10th, around that area, I started noticing I had a lot of swelling and pain. I actually thought I injured the toes on my right foot. It was so swollen and just painful. It felt like an injury. So I made an appointment with my primary care and with my podiatrist, checked it out. We really couldn't tell much just because the surgery was so extensive. A lot of swelling was expected. However, we didn't know that it was much more serious than just swelling from surgery. So mind you, I was also on the anticoagulants or blood thinners to try to prevent blood clots. So around kind of mid to end March, there was a day, I would say on a Thursday, that I started to notice I had a lot of pain, but it was pain in my all the way up my right leg, into the glutes, into the lower back, the mid back, upper back. So you would actually see me, if you saw me that night, you would see me with 3 different heating pads on my body. I was in that much pain, but I assumed it was from all the housework I did. I did a lot of chores that day on a knee scooter. So I expected I would have some kind of pain from that. So I had the heating pads on. That next day, I started to feel like a little congestion in the chest. I had a slight cough, so I chalked it up to my allergies. I took some allergy medicine, went to sleep. Next day, doing household chores like laundry and my knee scooter, and noticed that with any kind of little movement, my heart was racing. So I decided to just check my heart rate. And sure enough, it would hit the 130s for a little bit of movement. When my heart rate is normally at rest, it was normally in the 50s because I was active, very active before the surgery. So as the day went through, I noticed that it continued to happen when I moved around doing laundry. I then would have to sit down after doing a little bit because my heart was racing, get back up, sit back down. I was getting a little bit fatigued, and eventually towards the early evening, I actually started noticing when I would do a little movement that I had a really like gripping pain in the left side of my chest, almost like somebody was taking my heart and just squeezing it in their hand. So that was my clue right then and there. I sat down. I called my little sister who's in the same house with me, but I called her and I talked to Mom, and I said, okay, I think I have a blood clot. Maybe I should just go to the hospital. And we eventually all agreed, okay, fine. My little sister drove me to the hospital. Got there, my heart rate was just slightly elevated, but all my vitals were pretty normal. So, I mean, they triaged me, they did blood work, they did an EKG. I sat and waited for a while in the ER. I'm pretty sure because my vitals were normal, they probably didn't think it was an emergency. So my blood work finally came back, and they called my name and sent me to the back room. Mind you, the ER was pretty full because of COVID too. So they sent me on back, put me in a room. They started an IV. The doctor immediately came in and said, okay, I'm sending you for a CAT scan. Your blood work came back with a high enzyme for the heart, and this enzyme is called troponin. And so that was pretty high for me. The number was pretty high. So she said that can indicate that something's going on with your heart and maybe even blood clots. So sent me right in for the CAT scan. Went in. They transferred me from one bed to the other to lay down for the CAT scan. Did the CAT scan. They injected the dye. And I immediately started actually coughing while I was laying down for the CAT scan, which was unusual. Soon as I got up, the technician came back into the room with me, and she immediately asked me, have you ever had blood clots before? And when she said that, I immediately knew that that's what we were dealing with. So came back to the room. The results came back actually rather quickly. The ER doctor came in and she said, look, we're getting you a bed prepared. You've got to get to the ICU now. So that's when things kind of like everything went so fast. I didn't even know what was going on really. But they immediately started me on heparin, which is basically what we call a blood thinner, but it's really an anticoagulant. So it just makes the blood like less sticky. So they put me on that. They were preparing the ICU bed. I immediately began texting all of my loved ones, as many as I could, family, friends, just letting them know if anything happened to me that I love them dearly. At that point, it was understood from the doctor that there was a chance that I probably wouldn't make it throughout that night. Basically, looking at the results from the CAT scan, my lungs were like basically completely full of clots. And so it was kind of amazing that I was even still sitting there alive. So I texted everyone. I tried to call my husband, who was stuck in Ghana for 3 months attending his grandmother's funeral. But with COVID, he ended up with a positive test for COVID while he was there. So he was trapped there. He couldn't be home. I tried to call him, couldn't reach him. And that's when I really went into a panic. At that moment, my heart rate went way over the 230s, and that's when they called it one of the codes. I don't even remember what code, but everybody ran into the room to see what was going on, if I was going into some kind of cold or heart failure or what. But they realized it was just the weight of the situation, and so the nurses, all the staff, and they were trying to get me back to a normal range. So they also gave me anxiety meds too to calm me down. So my little sister also called my good friend, who's an ER doctor, who also looked out for me too. She came and they sent me off to the ICU. So next part, the ICU. Let me tell you, the ER staff and the ICU staff at South Suburban Hospital was freaking awesome. They were amazing. They were on point. The nurses were just great in the ICU. I loved them. I almost hated to leave, but I needed to leave. So in the ICU, I was moved like really early that morning, and they had prepared me that I would have a cardiologist and pulmonologist come in and testing done. So pulmonologist came in first. Hey, we're sending you home on blood thinners. You can go home in about a day. And so cardiologist came in after that and said, oh, no way can you go home. based on the test, the EKG, and the high troponin levels, it was apparent that something else was going on with the heart. So they ordered an echocardiogram. Later on that day, they came in for the echocardiogram, did the scan, realized that not only were the lungs full of clots, but the heart itself was under a lot of strain and stress, and I ended up with right-sided heart enlargement and right-sided heart strain because of the clots. The heart was working so hard to pump blood, with the pressure of those clots. So they did a screening, and they decided that I would be a good candidate for a particular procedure. At that time, I believe it was called a thrombectomy. It may have kind of changed, but it was not a procedure that was done very often. But as a kind of, let's save this heart, you're young, let's try to save your heart, let's pull out all the stops. They did the procedure. They scheduled it for that next morning. We went in for that procedure, and that morning I was awake. They informed me I would be awake through the procedure. They told me what was going to happen, how it would go. At that point, I have no time to think. I'm just agreeing to anything that's going to save my life. So we go in for the procedure. And I was just astonished at how many people were in the room. It was just so many people. There were two cardiologists, there were three nurses, there was I believe it's an ultrasound technician, and a couple other people going in and out of the room. So they were prepping. They moved me from one table to the other, and they informed me, okay, you're going to be awake, but we're going to give you some kind of sedative so that you're calm during the procedure. So the whole time I had a nurse holding my hand at my side during the procedure the whole time. So they made an incision in the groin, and they attached a port. So I did feel the incision. Even though there was local anesthetic done, I did feel the incision, and the port was probably what hurt, was the port that was attached to the incision. So from there, everything was just a blur, but I was awake. They did a catheter, and the catheter, you could feel the pressure of it coming all the way up. They had to take their time, but you could feel the pressure of them sucking the clots out. They were sucking them out, and as the clots came out, they would end up in this like tray that they had to the side. They were counting the clots, and after 20 something, they stopped counting. So I had an extensive amount of clots that they pulled out. They pulled the catheter out and realized that there were a few more larger clots left. So they went back in and they got the rest of the larger ones. It was two cardiologists working on me. And the nurse was so great, who was by my side, making sure I was okay. I needed to be awake because there were times that they needed me to hold my breath. There were times they needed me to breathe in slowly or breathe out quickly. I guess to kind of just guide everything. So the procedure was over. Everybody was happy and congratulating, and just relieved that everything went well, because sometimes during that particular procedure, some people don't make it even during that particular procedure. So afterwards, the doctor showed me all the clots, and he said that I've never seen this before. It was just so many. You should not be alive right now. So that was definitely something. And if you guys aren't squeamish, I will attach a photo below and put some kind of warning, so you just don't go into it and see it, but it is graphic. I do have a picture of the clots that were in the tray. They did leave the smaller clots that they couldn't quite get to in the lungs. So, I mean, they made me aware of that I still had clots in the lungs. So after the procedure, I basically rested up, couldn't sit up for a certain amount of time. I had to stay laid down for a while. The next day, they had another technician come in and do a scan of my leg and determine there were a ton of clots from my ankle all the way up to the upper thigh. So I had a lot of clots, and the ones in the leg are called deep vein thrombosis, and the ones in your lung are called pulmonary embolism or emboli or whatever. So after that, After recovering another day in the ICU, they moved me to a cardiac unit. So I was basically in a room by myself, yay, with nursing staff almost around the clock. They were so attentive. I was on painkillers. I was on the blood thinners, the heparin. Um, I did have a lot of other symptoms that started occurring in the hospital, like incontinence, uh, extremely bad acid reflux, GERD, like just drinking water, it was over with. So, I mean, a lot of things, bad headaches, all kinds of things. So, it was pretty much a pretty big trial in the hospital. So they started to bridge me to the drug warfarin, which is an anticoagulant, and that would be the one that I would take after the hospital. So the one they wanted me to take was Eliquis, but my insurance wouldn't cover it. It's such an expensive drug. My insurance wouldn't cover it, even though that would be the easier one to take. Warfarin, you have to go almost every week to get your PT INR levels checked, which means they just have to prick your finger every week to make sure you're in range. So they basically bridged me to that, and they released me from the hospital, but they released me to home health nursing care. So I was under a facility that was doing home health nursing care and hospice care. So that was the instructions, to release me to nursing and home health and hospice care. So I was there at the home for 2 weeks and had someone come and visit me, nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists for my leg. So I did have pretty good care afterwards, and after the 2 weeks I was discharged from the home health nursing agency, where I can kind of get around a little bit more. So needless to say, this is Blood Clot Awareness Month. I thought I would share my story. Stay tuned. I'll be posting more videos about my experience afterwards, symptoms that I had afterwards, and still experiencing things today, medicines that I've been on, the whole shebang. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for tidbits on blood clot awareness, prevention, symptoms, all of that. Also, let's see. I think that's pretty much it. I will share more videos. Feel free to ask me questions. I am always available to ask questions if you're going through the same thing, if you've gone through it and you just need somebody to talk to, if you're experiencing it and all of the things that come with it, and or if you just have questions, feel free to comment. Send some shout outs and some support. I just want to say I do appreciate all my good friends that came out to the hospital, came to see me when I was at home, family members, those that checked on me constantly, that kept me going through the whole situation, and those that are still checking on me now. It's still a rough go, but yeah. So stay tuned. Thank you so much, and talk to you later.